Hi from Arizona. I'm really sorry I can't be there in person, but I am excited and proud to share our story about our team. I hope this will inspire you and encourage you to not give up. The shelter has made such amazing progress, but as you know, we had some dark days, and to hear the story, you have to hear it to really appreciate what we've come through. I was working in Danville and retired and moved to Maysville. When I arrived, I wanted to do something in the community to meet people, so I decided to go down to the shelter and volunteer and walk dogs. My first day of walking dogs, I was a little stunned and amazed that the dogs had no preventative medications, and the staff was a bit chaotic. There were no rules or regulations. So I have no previous history of animal welfare, but I knew they needed help and I wanted to make a difference. So I first approached the judge executive to ask if we could have a volunteer program. And they had some volunteers there. The judge was skeptical about letting us have a full official volunteer program because he has been burned in the past from employees and previous volunteers. The community had such a negative opinion of the shelter. They would only criticize it, but no one really wanted to help. So after some convincing, he said, yes, let's have a program for volunteers. I wrote up a volunteer manual, it was approved, and we started advertising for volunteers. Of course, this was difficult due to the bad reputation the shelter had. But a couple people stepped up. We got some donations and started giving the dogs parvo vaccines and dewormer. At this time, they also had cats in the shelter. So we did get some vaccines for the cats. We flea dipped them all, but they were very sick. They were dying from a virus that was in the room they were in. It was poor ventilation. It was pretty much chaos. So I knew I needed more help from the outside instead of just working within the community. I reached out to a friend who helped the Danville Boyle County Humane Society, and she told me Sarah Pisano, Todd Blevins, and Monica Frieden-Tarrant were the people to help us. Now during this time, I also wanted a play yard for the animals. So I went out and priced fencing material, contacted a contractor, and approached the judge again about spending money to have this play yard. He said if I raised half the money, the county would put up the other half. Within 6 to 8 weeks, with the help of the Buffalo Stampede Run, we had enough money, and they actually installed the fence, which was a huge help in getting the dogs out to play. So then I contacted the wonderful national experts, Todd, Sarah, and Monica. We set up a meeting with the fiscal court. They came to help. No one in the past had had any kind of formal training for animal shelter management. So they talked to the judge and us, and we worked through a lot of problems. They gave us tons of resources. Things were, we were getting more volunteers, and then one of the shelter workers was arrested for drugs. So that hurt the volunteer again. Couldn't get volunteers to come. Then we had parvo hit the shelter. That was another challenge that we had to overcome because we didn't know about parvo and how to care for it. Then another employee was arrested for stealing dogs. So then the shelter had a bad light. We would take 2 steps forward, 1 back. But we continued to make progress. We started giving the dogs parvo vaccines on intake. I started making a manual file of all the dogs and their medical records. We had to keep track somehow. There was no file records in place. Finally, the employees were fired, and Angie came to work part-time. She worked into a full-time job, which was, for her, she took over a mess, but we worked hard. Then Jennifer Seti-Bakken came on board and helped help forces with me, which was huge. She is a computer genius. We had a software program put in place. And Angie was the only employee for a few weeks. So Jen and I were there at the shelter till 7 or 8 at night helping Angie. And again, we had this parvo vaccine virus in the shelter. So we were bleaching 3 times a day and cleaning, and it was stressful, but we could see the light at the end of the tunnel. And then Angie decides to resign and go back to South Dakota. Well, at that point, Marilyn was working part-time. She moved into the director position, and we revamped, and things were just really moving on. With help from Monica and Sarah and Todd, we've got a bunch of resources, and it just a different atmosphere. We hired good help. Things were going great. The dogs were getting good care, but they still weren't getting rabies shots. So we contacted a local vet. Prior to this, vets did not want to help out because of the past horrible history. One of the local vets agreed to talk to us. I went down and convinced him the shelter was changing and we would be organized. He came down for his first visit to give his monthly rabies shots and was so happy at the cleanliness and how we care for the dogs in our organization. He was smiling ear to ear, saying, I am finally helping the dogs instead of coming down and euthanizing them. So with this point though, Jen and I were taking 3 or 4 dogs a week to get spayed and neutered in Ohio to help us with cost. Eventually, JT Williams, he decided he would give us a break and do all our spay and neuters and monthly rabies shots and medical care for the dogs. So we're forming partnerships that were just so wonderful. So during this time, my neighbor was getting a concert ready together for rescues. He asked me to buy a ticket. He had no idea I was working with the Mason County Animal Shelter. I offered to help. We had this concert. He raised $3,000 to help with the spay. We started a spay and neuter program then. And that led to Kelly, Jen, and I, and Marilyn and Shayla to form the 501c3, which raising funds to help the shelter. The county cannot afford things on their own. They need more volunteer donations, 501c3 to help them with cost. The community thought the county had all this money, why not get a new building? But the new building wouldn't have helped. We needed to change the inner workings and get management. So we finally had that. It was a struggle, it was challenging, it was blood, sweat, and tears, and now to see where we are has made such a difference that I get very emotional at the progress we made and how many heartbreaks there were. I was ready to give up several times and made phone calls to Todd and Sarah, and they would urge me to keep going because for this wonderful cause we made a huge difference, and now our shelter is one of the best in the county. I can guarantee the dogs get loving care. We have so many programs, so I'm going to turn you back to Marilyn to see our team's wonderful progress. Thank you for listening.